A new NHL season is about to begin. So, I decided to predict every single game by every single team. But we're going to be talking about the Utah Hockey Club and what's going to happen in all 82 of their regular season games. But first, let's talk a little bit about some of the methodology. A huge factor in my decision making was to figure out the rest and travel factors for each and every team, balance them out in each matchup, figure out who has an advantage or if it's even, and then make an adjustment necessary to those rest and travel factors. Based on my reasoning, the Utah Hockey Club ranked 25th out of 32 teams in schedule difficulty. Regardless, after considering all the offseason moves, rest and travel factors, play styles, and relative perceived talent of the teams, I present to you now a prediction of all 82 games in the inaugural season of the Utah Hockey Club before the season even begins. Season begins against the Chicago Blackhawks for the Utah Hockey Club. Inside of the Delta Center, it should be absolutely an amazing scene. Chicago, not very good at all last season. Connor Bedard, of course, very exciting, but we'll give this one to the Utah Hockey Club. In their home opener, home debut, they come away with a win. Send people home happy in that first game. Next, Utah Hockey Club has a interesting challenge. They'll go all the way to the East Coast. They will be the season opener for the New York Islanders. And the Islanders, I think, will get the win. Then, Utah Hockey Club will play against the Rangers. Rangers have a full day rest advantage over Utah Hockey Club, and Rangers are very good. So we'll give them the win on this one as well. New Jersey then welcomes the Utah Hockey Club. I believe this will be a spirited contest. I do think New Jersey probably gets the win over John Marino and the Utah Hockey Club, but let's give an overtime loss point to the UHC. Tricky test comes next as the Utah Hockey Club finally leaves the East Coast early in the season, but does not go home. They go to Anaheim first for a game of the pond. Anaheim, not expected to be super strong, but I do think that they will come away with a victory over the Utah Hockey Club. After 4 straight games on the road, well, they're back in the Delta Center, and they will be welcomed by the Boston Bruins. Bruins, very strong team. I think Boston will probably beat the Utah Hockey Club in their second game at home. Utah Hockey Club next welcomes the Ottawa Senators. Senators will be flying 2 time zones in for this one. I like the Utah Hockey Club as we enter into that game. Next, Utah Hockey Club welcomes the powerful Colorado Avalanche, and I think Colorado will win this game, but I think it'll be a spirited contest. Let's give an overtime loss point to the Utah Hockey Club. Back onto the road, Los Angeles Kings. They're going to play that neutral zone trap. There will be lots of dumps into the zone by the Utah Hockey Club. I think they'll have a hard time scoring. I think let's give this one to Los Angeles. Back at home against the San Jose Sharks. I believe they will win that game. Then Utah will play against Calgary. Lots of people actually with connections to Calgary live in this area, and so that'll be a pretty interesting environment. There may be quite a bit of Calgary Flames fans of that game. I expect that one to be really an interesting environment. I see this as a very close game, but I ultimately think Utah Hockey Club will come away with the win over the Flames. Head back onto the road. They will go play the Vegas Golden Knights. Let's give the Knights a win in this one. Then they travel to the Winnipeg Jets. Winnipeg will probably come away with a win in this one. So Winnipeg over Utah. St. Louis Blues and the Utah Hockey Club. I kind of have a sneaking suspicion that this may become the weird rivalry. It's not necessarily regional, but I do kind of feel like there will be a little heat between these teams. I know the Blues have the Blackhawks. I know the Blues have lots of people that they've already got a history with. But I do think that the Utah Hockey Club will develop a little something here with the St. Louis Blues. They certainly play each other quite a lot. Let's give the Blues the win in this encounter. Next, Utah will go to the Nashville Predators, and I even though I think Nashville will be a better team than Utah, and picking the Utah Hockey Club to beat Nashville on the road. This is because this game will be the third game in 4 nights for the Nashville Predators. So I think that it's just a grind. There'll be some tired legs out there, and I think that when you're playing a team that will want to get in transition, get on the rush the way the Utah Hockey Club is, I like Utah over Nashville in that game. Utah then goes and plays Carolina at home, and they will have over 2 days rest advantage on the Carolina Hurricanes. So let's give Utah the win over Carolina at home. Then they'll play Vegas. Let's give that again to Utah. They're going on a little run here. They also will then play the Washington Capitals. The Capitals will come in and they will be dead. I feel very confident that the Utah Hockey Club will get the Capitals in this game. Capitals have a back-to-back coming into that game. It's their third game in 4 nights. Utah Hockey Club will have a 2-day rest advantage on a team that's playing a back-to-back and their third game in 4 nights. Utah Hockey Club in that one. Then Utah Hockey Club goes on the road. They'll play the Boston Bruins. Let's give this to the Bruins. Utah Hockey Club will then go and play Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh will be on the back half of a back-to-back in this one, and Utah will have more than a day's rest advantage on the Penguins. Let's say that the Utah Hockey Club wins their first ever encounter with the Penguins out in Pittsburgh. They then head to Toronto. Toronto now will have the huge rest advantage. Utah comes in on a back-to-back, 3 games, 4 nights. This is a very tough spot for the Utah Hockey Club. Toronto as well, very skilled team, lots of goals coming out of Austin Matthews. I see Toronto beating up on the Utah Hockey Club in that one. Then they go to Montreal. Montreal will have a day's advantage. Third game in 4 nights for the Utah Hockey Club. Tough road trip. Let's give that one to the Montreal Canadiens. Then they play Edmonton back at home. Edmonton is going to have almost a 3-day rest advantage, even in a homecoming game. That's too much to overcome, especially because Connor McDavid, Stanley Cup Finals, it's Edmonton. We all know. So Edmonton over Utah. Back on the road. Immediately after playing Edmonton on a back-to-back, they will be playing the Vegas Golden Knights in Las Vegas. It's an interesting game from a rest perspective. Utah Hockey Club will be on a back-to-back. Vegas will also be playing back-to-back games, 2 straight nights in a row. They will also be playing their third game in 4 nights in this matchup. So I think a bunch of tired legs, but given that it's the third game in 4 nights and a back-to-back for the Vegas Golden Knights, and that Utah will also be on the back-to-back as well, I just think there's a little bit extra going against the Vegas Golden Knights. So let's give this one to the Utah Hockey Club over Vegas in that encounter. Utah comes back home. They play a game against the Dallas Stars. Again, this is a third game in 4 nights for the Utah Hockey Club, but it's also a back-to-back and third game in 4 nights for the Dallas Stars. I think that's a lot to go against the Stars. I know that Dallas is going to be better and finish much higher than the Utah Hockey Club this year. In this instance, just given the rest and travel and all of the factors that I've looked into there, I'm saying Utah Hockey Club over the Dallas Stars in this encounter. Next, Buffalo Sabres on the road for the Utah Hockey Club. Lots of travel going out there, but the Utah Hockey Club will have almost 3 days rest advantage over Buffalo. I actually kind of see Utah Hockey Club and Buffalo both in a similar spot. Lots of young players. It's almost in some ways, let's take a step forward this year. That's the narrative for both teams. Can we break into the playoffs? They're very close. When I see 2 teams that are close, but one of them has 3 days rest advantage, even if it means you just traveled all the way across the country, that much rest advantage will make the travel less important in this scenario. So let's give that to the Utah Hockey Club over the Buffalo Sabres. The Philadelphia Flyers will be on a back-to-back and on their third game in 4 nights. The Utah Hockey Club will have played Buffalo the night before, but I think this probably results in Utah beating the Philadelphia Flyers in Philly. That should be a really close game, a really hotly contested game. I can see that being a really fun game to watch this year. Utah then comes home after that quick road trip to Buffalo and Philadelphia and will play the Minnesota Wild at home. It'll be the third game in 4 nights for the Utah Hockey Club, plus they just traveled all the way back across the country. Minnesota will have more than a day's rest advantage over the Utah Hockey Club. Give this one to the Minnesota Wild. Utah then quickly jumps back onto the road after just 1 game at home. They'll play the Colorado Avalanche next. There will be no rest advantage for either team. And the Avalanche will have just come back from the East Coast. So it's their first trip back. It's a quick journey back. Let's give Utah Hockey Club the win in this one. San Jose also coming back from the East Coast on their road trip. I think San Jose is not going to be very good. They're just going to be like Chicago last year. They're going to be playing lots of Macklin Celebrini. I think Utah over San Jose. Utah then comes back home. They will have over 2 days rest advantage against the Vancouver Canucks. And so we'll give the game to Utah. Next game on the road after, again, one quick stop back in Salt Lake City. The Minnesota Wild on the road. I like Minnesota in this game. Then Utah comes back home. We'll take on Anaheim. Give that one to the Utah Hockey Club. The Dallas Stars. In this matchup, the Utah Hockey Club has a back-to-back. They just played Minnesota. That'll be their third game in 4 nights. Dallas has none of those problems and will have over 2 days rest advantage on the Utah Hockey Club. Give that to the Dallas Stars. Utah will host the Colorado Avalanche. The Avalanche will have over a day's rest advantage on the Utah Hockey Club. Plus, they've got Nathan MacKinnon and a whole host of awesome players. Give that to the Colorado Avalanche. Utah then travels to Seattle, where they will take on the Kraken. Utah will have over a day's rest advantage on the Kraken. I think that'll matter. These teams are close-ish. I think Utah's a little better. So, yeah, Utah over Seattle. Seattle with an overtime loss point, though. Utah then goes to Edmonton. Utah will be on a back-to-back. It'll be the third game in 4 nights. Let's give that one to Edmonton. And let's give Utah an overtime loss point. Utah then continues on the road. They'll play the Calgary Flames. It'll be the third game in 4 nights for the Utah Hockey Club. And Calgary should have a well-rested team. So let's give that to the Calgary Flames. And I like Dallas in that game over the Utah Hockey Club. Utah then gets to come home, and they'll take on the defending champs, the Florida Panthers. And they will have 2 days rest advantage over the Florida Panthers. I don't know. It feels like a goofy spot. I know Florida's a lot better, but I kind of like Utah over Florida in that one, just to mix it up a little bit. Then we've got the San Jose Sharks coming into Utah. This is a long homestand that's coming up here. San Jose will have 1 day's rest advantage over the Utah Hockey Club. I will give that to the San Jose Sharks. Then Utah will be playing a back-to-back third game in 4 nights against the New York Islanders. And the Islanders will have over a day's rest advantage against Utah. Let's give it to the New York Islanders. Canadians will have just flown in from the East. I like Utah in that spot. New York Rangers are next. And I think the Rangers are better than Utah. And I think that they will perform well. So New York Rangers over Utah in that one. St. Louis Blues come into town. St. Louis will lose to the Utah Hockey Club. Next, Winnipeg comes into town, and I like Winnipeg. They go play the Minnesota Wild on the road. Minnesota will get the win there. Winnipeg, I feel strongly, will win on this encounter between these teams. Utah will be coming on a back-to-back, so let's give this one to Winnipeg. After going to Winnipeg, Utah Hockey Club will go to Ottawa. They will play their third game in 4 nights, but the good news is that Ottawa will be on a back-to-back and be playing their third game in 4 nights. Utah will have a day's rest advantage. Let's go Utah Hockey Club over the Ottawa Senators in that one. Utah comes back home. They host the Pittsburgh Penguins, and they will have about a day and a half rest advantage over the Pittsburgh Penguins. Utah Hockey Club over Sidney Crosby again. Then Utah hosts the Columbus Blue Jackets. The Blue Jackets are not good, so I think they will lose. Utah Hockey Club over the Columbus Blue Jackets. Utah then hosts the Blues. Let's give Utah the win over the Blues, but give the Blues an overtime point. Utah hosts Philadelphia. And let's have Utah win that one, but also give Philadelphia an overtime point in that matchup. Utah then goes on the road to play Columbus, and it's their first trip on the road. It's the beginning of the road trip, and Columbus has to win sometimes. And I don't know. I just get the feeling that sometimes you might be able to catch this young group off their game from time to time. So while they may surprise a team like Florida and get a win in that circumstance, they may also lose to a team like Columbus from time to time. So we'll take the Columbus Blue Jackets over the Utah Hockey Club here. Second game of the road trip, they play Carolina. I like Carolina's team. I think their GM is a genius, and I think that I'm so happy to see Tulsky be promoted to be the GM. I've been a follower of his work and paid attention to him for a long time now, and so Eric Tulsky manages the Carolina Hurricanes, and I believe Carolina will get the win in this one. The Washington Capitals then welcome a very tired Utah Hockey Club team playing their back-to-back third game in 4 nights. Washington will have 1 day and 18-hour rest advantage over Utah in this one. I think this is a slam dunk. That's definitely a win by the Caps. Then, instead of coming back home, they go all the way from the East Coast and fly into Los Angeles. They'll play a game at LA, and LA will get the win. LA has about a full day's rest advantage over Utah in that one as well. Utah Hockey Club then finally gets back home. They will be playing a back-to-back after flying into LA, and then the next night they will be playing Vancouver at home. Vancouver will be playing a back-to-back as well. So, 2 teams playing a back-to-back. I think Vancouver's better than Utah, but I also think that Utah is going to be at home. So while I could be convinced either way, you have to pick it. Let's say Utah over Vancouver, but give the overtime point to Vancouver. Then Utah will host the Chicago Blackhawks again. This will be Utah's 3rd game in 4 nights. It's also going to be Chicago's 3rd game in 4 nights. Same rule applies. Give the advantage to the home team, Utah Hockey Club, over the Chicago Blackhawks, but give the Blackhawks an overtime point. Minnesota then comes and plays the Utah Hockey Club, and I'm going to take Minnesota in this game. I think a couple dramatic, tired games, and then there's a little chance to rest for a couple days. Then you play Minnesota. It just could be mental fatigue spot there for the Utah Hockey Club. I'll say Minnesota Wild over Utah in that one, but it should be a really close contest. Then Utah will host the New Jersey Devils. The Devils will have 1 full day's rest advantage on the Utah Hockey Club, and with that rest, I believe it'll make the difference. Let's give the game to the Devils. Utah then plays on the road at Detroit. Utah will have 3 days rest on the Detroit Red Wings. So I say Utah. Then next, the team goes to Chicago. Utah Hockey Club will be on a back-to-back after winning on the road at Detroit. They get Chicago. Chicago will have a full day's rest. Utah will be on a back-to-back. Chicago has none of those concerns. Let's give this game to the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, Utah comes back home. They'll host the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Toronto Maple Leafs will come into town. I don't know. Again, kind of a goofy night. I see Utah beating Toronto, but give Toronto an overtime point. Then we'll have Utah hosting the Anaheim Ducks. Utah will beat Anaheim, full day's rest advantage over the Anaheim Ducks, plus the Ducks come in on a back-to-back. Seattle then will host the Utah Hockey Club, and I like Seattle in this one, but I am giving an overtime point to the Utah Hockey Club. Then they will go to Vancouver, where they will be playing Vancouver, who will be on a back-to-back. So Utah will have a rest advantage of over a day, and Vancouver will be playing a back-to-back. Let's give this one to the Utah Hockey Club with a big road win against the Vancouver Canucks. And I hope Dylan Guenther scores just to torture Canucks fans even more, because they traded assets away, which resulted in Dylan Guenther being on the Utah Hockey Club. It's a fun subplot. Maybe the worst trade in Canucks history. It's up there, and it'd be fun if it just got compounded by Dylan Guenther. It's a fun thing to root for, so yeah, let's pick Utah over Vancouver in this one. Then they go on the road to Edmonton to finish their 3-game road trip. They'll play the Oilers in Edmonton. Edmonton will have just traveled back in from the East Coast. Long road trip, first time getting back home. Maybe it'll feel good, that feel-good home feeling. But again, I kind of like Utah with little mojo after beating Vancouver, little confidence. End of season, maybe there'll be a third goalie scenario for Edmonton. I don't know. I figured something like that. Utah over the Oilers. Then Utah plays the Buffalo Sabres at home. Buffalo will have just flown in. It's their first game on the road. I think Utah over the Sabres. Utah to beat Tampa Bay at home. I got them on a little run here, don't I? A little winning streak. They're putting it together. Then they will play the Detroit Red Wings again at home. I like Utah over Detroit, but let's give an overtime point to the Red Wings. Tampa Bay then will host the Utah Hockey Club, and Tampa Bay is going to win that game. Then Utah Hockey Club will head down to play the Florida Panthers. Florida will have a 4-day rest advantage. It's one of the biggest rest advantages on the entire NHL docket for all teams this year. 4-day rest advantage for the Florida Panthers heading into this one. Plus, Utah will have a back-to-back heading into that after playing Tampa Bay the night before. It's always a game where you end up with a bunch of bruises, and playing Florida right after that, it's tough. That trip into Florida is going to be brutal for every team this season. So Tampa Bay, then Florida. Yep, Florida Panthers are winning that. 4 days rest. Utah on a back-to-back, no chance. Utah then goes on the road to Chicago. 3rd game, 4 nights after getting beat up by Tampa and Florida. I like the Chicago Blackhawks to pick up another win. There are no challenges for Chicago in that game, where Utah's on their 3rd game in 4 nights. Chicago has no back-to-back. They have no travel, things that make that game a little funny. I like the Blackhawks in that spot. Then Utah comes home, and they will play a Calgary Flames team that will be playing a back-to-back. It'll be their 3rd game in 4 nights. In that scenario, with Utah over a day and a half's rest advantage, let's give this one to the Utah Hockey Club. Utah Hockey Club will then host the LA Kings, and I don't know that they're just going to get swept by the LA Kings all year, so my reasoning here, Utah over LA at home. Utah, again, at home, will play Winnipeg. I like Winnipeg in this spot. I like Winnipeg's team. I like some of the things that they bring this year. So I give this one to the Winnipeg Jets. Then Seattle will come in and be playing in Salt Lake City again. Utah will have a 2 days rest advantage. Seattle will be on a back-to-back, 3rd game in 4 nights. That's just the double whammy scenario against the Seattle Kraken. So Utah Hockey Club over Seattle with 2 days rest advantage. This is one of the games I feel super confident about, just looking at the data before it all happens. Injuries and all those things aside, as we're picking preseason like this, I like this one late in the season. Then we've got Utah finishing up their home stand for the entire year of their inaugural season against the Nashville Predators. And I think Utah wins against Nashville at home to close out their first inaugural season in the Delta Center. Their season will end, though, on the road in the regular season. That will put them against the Dallas Stars on the road. I like Dallas. Dallas is a better team. I like that spot for Dallas. Then Nashville hosts the Utah Hockey Club. Nashville will have just traveled back in from the West Coast. Utah will have been in Nashville for a day over them, so I like the Utah Hockey Club over Nashville in that spot. And lastly, Utah finishes the season on a back-to-back, playing 3 games and 4 nights at the St. Louis Blues. They will end the season with a loss to the Blues. So, the results. Utah Hockey Club with 41 wins, 41 losses, 5 of them in overtime. The result, 87 points on the season, and I think it puts them just on the outside, looking in to the playoffs. It's a step forward for this team. It's 10 more points than the previous season, and with some cap space and some room to grow and a couple more rookies coming into the mix, maybe next season is the year they break into the playoffs.